we can talk about new growth, right? But then we have override dollars that is another variable that impact the tax rate.
You're talking about the debt exclusion.
Yes. I'm sorry, Joe, I should have used this term.
Yes, when we pay it off next September, that'll come off the debt exclusion. That'll come right off the amount we exclude, that we were going to exclude for our debt payment. So it will benefit the taxpayer. Next year.
Next year.
Next year, not
Okay, not this year. Okay.
So
And that's because we had already paid the interest for this year. Come September, when the note was due, we pay the entire note off. Right. But the impact isn't seen until next year.
And we reduced that portion this year. And the 255.
I guess the question is our exempt debt exposure counted in this here? It has to be, right?
Right.
Okay. But the adjustments or the changes that have been made have been carried forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you explain how that affects, if it does, the tax rate?
Well, there's going to be less that you can go over the Proposition 2.5 levy limit. So the amount of debt you were going to pay on the batch, now that you have the cash in hand to pay it, you're going to take that off of the amount you're going to tax over the Proposition 2.5 levy limit.
Basically, we've been holding off, paying off that portion of the debt and just going with bands, so we've been paying interest.
Right.
So there was let's say that $5 million exposure meant that we were going to get principal payments and interest the following year if that money didn't come in. That's not going to be so. So there's a savings of, what's it, 20, were those 20-year on the school, or 30-year?
It was 20 years for a building.
How many?
20.
20? So, you'd be saving, in simple terms, 120. If it turns out it's a little more than that because several years have gone by, plus the interest that was due for next year on that amount, then the $2 million, maybe a couple million more, would reduce our exposure. If that all comes in this year, then we can take advantage of it for next year. Okay. Other questions? I see the Finance Committee. Does the Finance Committee have any questions from the assessor? What?
Abby's over there.
Okay. Hi, Abby. Okay. With that, then, thank you. And
I didn't know if you wanted to talk about all the aspects of this, or just stick with the one minimum residential factor at this point, and then pick up the open space and the other.
no, let's go through everything that
Okay.
you plan on talking about. I'm sorry. Apologize.
Then you have to vote on whether to grant an open space discount or not. And we don't classify anything in North Reading as open space, and therefore, hopefully you will not grant a discount. You can also grant a residential and/or a small commercial exemption. You can give a residential exemption of up to 20% of the average assessed value of all properties eligible to be taxed at the residential tax rate, including vacant parcels, as part of the parcel count. This sounds good, but the entire amount of money that you're exempting comes from within the residential class. So what you're doing is you're shifting. It's the Robin Hood effect. You take from the wealthy and you give to the poor. Anybody who is assessed over the average will see an increase in the taxes, and anybody below the average assessment will see case would be something like $49,000 times maybe 5,000 parcels. And that would result in a new tax rate for residential properties. This is without a shift of $14.84 per thousand.
So everybody would get the exemption,
Right.
but then as a result of the fact that property values are,
Well, the fact is that if you have a property that, say the average is 400,000, and you grant the 10% exemption, 10% of 400,000 is 40,000. You would subtract $40,000 from each assessment in town. So somebody with a $300,000 assessment would be assessed on 260,000. Somebody with a 600,000 would be assessed on 560,000 at a rate of $14.
so it shifts the tax burden to the higher valued homes.
The other thing to bear in mind is
Excuse it.
that vacant land would also be taxed at the $14.84. So if you have a extra piece of land, you're gonna see a much higher tax bill. That's the small, I mean, that's the residential exemption. This is popular in cities like Boston, Cambridge, Chelsea, Brookline, to give a residential exemption. It's also popular in the Berkshires, where you have a lot of non-resident owners of property, and down the Cape. And that's because you have to live on the property, you have to be domiciled there in order to get this exemption. So we have something like 5,600 commercial, residential properties in town, but, you know, probably only 5,000 of that are actually domiciled. If you have a condo that you own for investment purposes, you wouldn't get it because you're not domiciled. This would help condo owners for the most part, because most condos are assessed below the average assessment of a single-family home. Live in a condo. All right, that's the residential. And then the small commercial exemption. An exemption of up to 10% of the average commercial property value can be granted to anybody who owns a piece of property that has a value of less than $1 million and has no more than 10 employees during the previous calendar year, as certified by the Department of Employment and Training. Okay. If you have a mom-and-pop type store and you don't report anything to the Department of Employment and Training, even though the property value may be less than $1 million, you wouldn't qualify because DET is not aware of the fact that you are there, and therefore they wouldn't certify your existence.
How do you cover the exemption?
This is one where it's totally within the commercial industrial class. So if you have an industrial property, you're getting it twice because you can't qualify for this exemption, but you do qualify for a higher tax rate.
So in other words, if, let's say you needed $100,000 worth of exemptions,
Right.
then that gets applied across the board to everybody in that particular
Who
commercial.
qualifies. Yeah, but you subtract that out of the total commercial industrial value, and now you come up with a tax rate that's higher than the $12.04.
But the tax rate is applied to everybody, even those that were exempt.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the higher tax rate.
Yep.
And also to the industrial properties who don't qualify.
Of course.
Those are your choices. residential, commercial, and industrial properties. Class, the exhibit B was the levy limit, and C has some terms in it. That's all I have to say.
So on the property breakdown, you've got 100 series of numbers, a 200 series, 300, 400. What are the definitions of those?
Well, the 100 series are all residential properties.
Oh, yeah, I guess I can see it from looking at the,
On the last page of the report, it says, Exhibit A, LA4. LA4, 100 series of residential properties, 300 series commercial, 400 are industrial. 012 to 043 represent mixed use, where you have some commercial and some residential. And the 500 series of personal property.
any questions on any of the information that's been presented? This
No.
morning? Okay. I guess now I can thank you. And thank you very much for the effort
Thank you.
in terms of getting that new growth approved. It's certainly going to make a big difference this year in terms of our ability to maintain at least services that we set out to maintain in April when we approved the town budget. At this point, I think Fiscal Advisory Committee having a formal presentation, Michael? Maybe we can shift things around, and are you all set up, or what are we going to do with the crowd? Continue? Stay?
Standing.
How about turning the air conditioner on a little bit? Yeah. Greg, can you turn the air conditioning on a little bit? Or open a window or two?
Cost-effective thing to do.
Greg, maybe we can just open a couple of windows. That might be,
More cost-effective. A little more cost-effective.
So we're saving all kinds of money.
Batteries are taken out.
just let a little air in here. You all set, Mike? Yes. What?
Excuse me, Greg, we offered, but he felt that he needed a buffer.
Okay.
First, I'd like to thank the board for this opportunity this evening to come and talk about this site. And also, let me introduce myself to telephone and also the audience. My name is Michael Frisco, I'm the chairman of the Fiscal Advisory Committee. Our charge is to try to research some ideas that could possibly help our Board of Selectmen deal with the continued